Hello and welcome to Resident Advisors Exchange, a series of conversations with the artists, labels and promoters who are shaping the electronic music landscape. My name's Ryan Keeling and I'm the editor at Resident Advisor. There may not be a more visible and thoroughly scrutinised artist in house and techno than Nina Kraviz. Charismatic both behind the decks and in the press, she tends to evoke strong opinions among dance music fans, and the discussion surrounding her often veers from the music she plays and releases. The hypnotic and gritty sound that forms the basis of her career can feel like it's hiding in plain sight. So when Kraviz offered to come by our office in Berlin for a chat with Jordan Rothlein in advance of her DJ Kicks mix, we opted to focus on her roots and inspirations. For Nina, evolving from a Moscow-based dentist with roots in Siberia to an A-list international DJ has been a trip. A word she often uses both literally and metaphorically, not least in the title of her ambitious new label project. And on this week's exchange, she takes us on one.
Nina, I'm struck by the fact that this could have all turned out very differently. When you first went to Moscow, you were going to study dentistry, which is quite a bit different from what you're doing now.
Yeah, that's true.
How do you make the transition from being a dentist to a house and techno DJ?
Well, at first I didn't make any transitions. I was in school and I was just like a normal teenager, but with lots of interests and, hobbies. In Siberia, where I'm coming from, children normally, they rarely have their own rooms. I mean, because families are like 1, 2, 3 kids, and it's very normal to have a big apartment. But normally, sisters and brothers, they share one room. So there's always a little bit less privacy than is needed. And I was just all the opposite. I had my own room because I was the only child. I am the only child in the whole family. And not only that me and my father is like really into records. He's been always buying them a lot, collecting them, and of course listening them to me when I was like a kid. And at some point, he basically gave me that Decca, like this Japanese amazing tape recorder, and also the other, we called it boombox, where you have the radio, you have tape player, and you basically can record things from the radio. You can also tune in whatever you want. So it was amazing. And it also had some speakers, so I was totally like on my own. I could be listening to my music sometimes, and that's what I really loved to do when I was little. At some point, I was just listening to the radio at night, and I was really into space, since I was really little.
Space, like outer space.
Yeah, space, outer space, astronomy. It was one of my favorite subjects: biology, astronomy, chemistry. And I was reading a lot of books on that, and I was dreaming a lot. And I would imagine that I'm going out to the outer space and all that. And somehow I thought that when you really try to tune in to the radio frequency, that, when you actually just approaching one, there's this very interesting space with some weird sounds, like
the space between two channels.
Yeah, and that this sound was so mysterious to me. It was so haunting, and I was thinking, that's actually interesting. Like, what's actually happening between all those two stations? And I thought, well, maybe this is exactly the field, like this sonic field, where probably some other galaxies could also send some messages by mistake, just end up in our one. And this just sounds so weird. And sometimes you would just go and there would be some really obscure voices coming, or some really strange Martian, And it was extremely fascinating. And so at one time I was just tuning in and I was like, what the hell is this? And that was this music that I never heard before. And it was acid track. I would only later understand that. And since that moment I started to record all the radio shows, and we had 5 hours in between Moscow and Irkutsk, where I was from. So when the radio show on Friday starts at 10 o'clock p.m., that means it's already 3 o'clock a.m. So, of course, the whole house was already asleep, and I would be in my room recording the music, and that was like so good. I think my real connection to this started from this radio experience, actually.
But did you imagine that you would be able to sort of one day turn this listening experience from something that feels a lot like fantasy into something that you're able to do for a living, make money from?
When I was doing it, I was just doing it for no reason. I was just basically enjoying that. I was just traveling in my own time zones and spaces and all that. And at some point there was this question what I want to do, and I was pretty good in history. I was all right with languages and literature. So me and my parents, we thought, you're really into music, but this always kind of saw me being a little bit helpful when someone's ill or someone just doesn't feel well or something. I'm just somehow doing something to help him out or whatever. So they thought, okay, maybe the medicine actually is what you have to do. And basically we decided that I'm going to become a dentist. And I became a student in the university, and then a year after I fell in love, and I moved to Moscow actually with the guy that I loved. And I continued to study in Moscow in the university, dental university. I finished, I became a doctor, and I even worked 3 years after, but that's not your question, right? And actually, the transition was really, I never really thought about the transition. On my first course at the university in the late 90s, I actually had already my radio program. I became a radio host. And I was just doing a little bit of writing, journalist work. And at some point, I knew everything about, Chicago, Detroit, all the pioneers, and basically it was so interesting for me. I don't know why, but I just got connected to it. And for a few years I've been working in the field of journalism as well as studying medicine. Also, I started doing a little bit promoters work and promotional agencies. I was actually dealing with all this party thing, and I would meet and host a lot of DJs and producers, and at the same time would do interviews with them. So it was really, really interesting. And I never really thought, that I would actually ever become a DJ like that. I was just doing something for the sake of doing it, and I was enjoying pretty much everything. I don't remember that I actually slept at all, because I was just all the time out. I was just doing all these things. I was living that parallel life where I would do all these parties and just would go and listen or dance totally sober. I was just so into dancing, and I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like you would be getting very much sleep during this period. Yeah. I mean, it's not like being a dentist, being a doctor isn't a whole lot of work. To be doing all of these things at the same time seems completely crazy.
Yeah, I mean, at first, of course, I was studying, but it was like a real... In other fields, you can miss a class, for example, and then you just go read about it a little bit, and that's it. You can just go through a certain exam and you're fine. But in medical university, every class you actually miss, you need to repeat it, exact amount of hours. So that was this thing gave me so much discipline that I'm actually really thankful about it. We had a little conflict with my parents, because when I started actually making this transition, really, because at some point I just started collecting records, and I became a record collector, and I started with playing in bars and in cafes, kind of easy listening 70s, 60s soundtracks for French, Italian movies, and also like this obscure electronica at the same time. And at the same time, I was collecting acid techno and like this kind of really hard and sometimes harsh, like manly music. And then I would come back to that later maybe. But at some point I was like thinking, hey, I actually spent so many years and I'm a dentist now, but it feels like I could have probably do something else, you know? I was like, Father, I actually think maybe it was all wrong. I spent so much time doing something that I'm now not doing anymore. And he was like, you know what? I don't really believe in such things. I always thought that, I always just felt that you would become something else, but I knew that you need to get like a real education. You need to become a real human being at first. You need to get a discipline. And I think that you would be grateful later for this, because it is really important to get this idea of like a real education. Actually, it really helps you to structure a lot of things for yourself.
And do you think he was right? I mean,
I think he's right. You know, there are always this kind of moments when you start to think about things a lot. I mean, I'm a hyperactive person. I've been working like since I'm 12. I've been babysitting like just to get some, you know, I'm always doing something and my head is full of things and it's just rolling and I sometimes cannot even stop it. And for these moments when you think like, hey, where are you at the moment? Like, where's your ground? And then somehow I feel like I have a ground and I know what is it all about, partly because I spent so much years on working with people or working for something and treating someone and studying and learning something. So basically now I can jump on everything I want and learn it because my brain is trained to have like classic education, I think, which is really cool. And for that, I'm really thankful for my parents that I actually did it. And, you know, because they are trained piano players as well, because in their times, every kid, you know, as soon as you have a kid, you need to make him like the most educated ones. We Russians, and especially in the Soviet times, they had this little thing about their kids to be the most educated and most talented. So they would normally go and put your kid in some sports section or like painting section or dancing, ballet or whatever, something like, or piano. But, you know, it was great because we had a lot of really talented outcome from this tradition. But I think sometimes it could be a bit too much for a little kid, you know, to go to piano classes and to go to sport one. So he doesn't really have any more time for himself. And my parents were like, you know, they're a bit more liberal about that. They thought, you know, my mom, she just once went and took me to the ballet dancing class. And I wasn't really enthusiastic about it because it was really painful. Because the first thing they actually try to do with a kid is just to stretch him a lot. And she got super concerned. She's like, you ain't going here anymore. Sorry.
It's incredibly hard on the body.
Yeah, like I'm not going to give my kid to this kind of thing. So that's it. The other thing was piano lessons. She said, you know, with your type of nervous system that you're having, I think you would hate music if we ever put you like in some musical school. So in the end, I am a musician, and I think I am a musician because, or I don't know, an artist because I didn't have anything to do with it when I was a kid. I've been having all this double life for quite a long, like for more than like 10 years. I've been slowly collecting music, meeting amazing people. You know, I will never forget this 2-3 years experience that I had in one promotional agency where I would just meet IF, for example, or Lydia Lange, all these different people, or Juan Atkins, like Los Hermanos. Then I would go and meet someone from legendary Pink Dots, or like someone from Psychic TV, like, you know, all these legends, and just an experience of meeting them and to have something like to talk to them, and just, it was amazing. Or with Grace Jones, you know, it was just incredibly great school for me, you know. I was doing my thing, my medical thing that nobody knew about when I would do some journalist work and taking care of people. But when I would go back to my working place, and, you know, for like 9 years, I would wake up because at 8 o'clock in the morning, I would have to be already in the hospital. I worked at the hospital for veterans of wars. So I was actually doing sometimes something for cosmonauts, retired cosmonauts. And I had so many interesting stories from them, or from some people that were in wars. You know, it was sometimes very touching, and I saw many things, like from this human perspective, first of all. I saw a lot of people to be lonely and suffering, but I also saw really nice moments when we would just, you know, share something really interesting together, and we became friends with some patients, and it was also a really nice experience. But in that place of my life, nobody really knew that I was already becoming slowly a DJ, that I would dance for like 8 hours somewhere, totally on music, you know, and then come back to my work again, you know. And the worst thing was that, you know, with this work, it didn't really give me a lot of time to be flexible and to travel, and because I always like to travel. My biggest problem with it was actually that I could probably actually work until now, if not only this thing that I couldn't continue asking for days off again and again.
It would be basically, I think, impossible given your schedule to carry on being a doctor. You know, I'm curious, being a doctor sort of requires that you make a very personal connection with other people, you know, having a good bedside manner. And one thing that people remark on often with your DJ sets is the connection that you have with the crowd. I kind of wonder if maybe some of what made you good, or what made you work really well in the medical world, kind of rubbed off on your DJ sets.
I think so. But yeah, that's the main point about art, music for me. Everything I do is extremely personal. That means I establish a certain connection with something. And if there is something that I don't feel, I don't believe someone can ever like it, or ever have any good experience of watching someone who is not able to take something personal, I think. That's how I see it, you know. Of course, there are a lot of other concepts. Yeah, for me, it was always like this. Very human, very personal, a lot of emotions. Maybe that's the biggest value for me in music.
Your DJ Kicks mix, which is just about to come out, like, it strikes me as being a very personal work. I think you mentioned in the promotional materials that accompanied it that this mix kind of really harkens back to those late nights spent listening to the radio, dreaming about space. There's that moment at the very end of the mix that almost sounds like kind of a radio broadcast with you speaking Russian over this ambient track. Am I right about that? Is this an especially personal work for you?
Yeah, I think so.
What was the process like then of putting it together? What was the concept?
When I got the offer to mix the next DJ Kicks, I was extremely happy, of course. But the next stage of this was just like, yeah, but what am I going to do with this now? Like, how can I really contribute to this series, to this legendary series, in the best way, yeah? And then I thought, well, for me, talking about DJ mixes, the art of DJing, yeah? I personally think and like about DJing that it can be so different, and approach can be really different. You can make a great magic, like just by playing 15 records together. And it can be absolutely amazing. For example, like one of my favorite ever mixes, DJ mixes by Matthew Herbert, Let's Make Mistakes, for Trésor. It's one of my favorite mixes. It's just like, it's so natural, and it's a little bit incorrect sometimes, and tracks are not at times mixed perfectly, and sometimes they are getting off the trail, but it's so charming, and somehow it just gets you immediately. And then there's this vibe and magic around it, and the dynamics of the mix are absolutely outstanding as well. And then because there's like this nice dynamic, and then suddenly there's like, check what your mama gave you out of nowhere. Like, it was actually one of my favorite moments of the mix, where just suddenly you have this surprising moment, like, wow, what is this? Like this turn around thing, like what is going on here? And of course there are so many other examples. For example, one of my favorite ever mix is live recording from the FM, again, radio program by Anton Kubikov, who is coming from my country as well, is Russian. Maybe people know him from Sky Z9 project. But I always liked him as a DJ at first place. So somebody recorded this set, I think from the late of 90s, if I'm not mistaken, where it's just like really nice, maybe about 45-50 minutes music from likes of Sveak Records, this kind of late 90s, early 2000s, really good house music with some of techno music like Casveli and some early Adam Beyer or Kirlian, like from Abduk. This all kind of really hypnotic, groovy yet a little wonky music played on vinyl live and recorded and went through the FM frequencies. So imagine, yeah. And then, at some point, he's like coming out and in the most casual way says, «Добрый вечер, меня зовут Антон Кубиков, вы слушаете радиостанцию 106 FM, оставайтесь с нами». Что-то вот вроде того. Something like this, Just very casual, just to remind the listener that he's actually there. Hello.
Just like a little track ID, basically.
It has such a brilliant effect. I don't know. I love it so much. I listened to that mix because it's on YouTube. You can also do it. I shared it on my Facebook one time. Every time I listen, it's amazing. If you want to work a little bit on your computer or just read a book and just turn down the lights a little bit, and then you just play this mix, not too loud, with not too much focus on it. It has to be a little bit on the background. And it just gets you somehow. It's just so hypnotic. You can't stop listening to it. It's magic, really. This is magic mix. And I don't know why. And then the other thing is that at some point you could hear these waves, like FM frequencies that are going a little bit.
So probably coming in on the radio of whoever's recording it.
Absolutely. And it's like, it really has an absolutely outstanding effect on me. Yeah. And then the first thing, of course, is there are some tracks in it where he mixes it and then he's like, oh, I changed my mind. So he just brings it back and then takes it back, and then in half an hour he comes back with the same track again. And there's some amazing moments, and they are there because it was totally unpredictable. It was just totally by chance. It was not planned. And it was at night, and a lot of people were listening to that mix, and I really believe in that a music somehow absorbs the energy of what is going on around. And this is extremely interesting because when you think of the concept, like what do you think it is so important about the mix? And I was thinking about what I want to deliver as an artist, because there is this concept, but I don't have a crowd. I am mixing this mix for myself. So there will not be additional energy input in my mix. I strongly believe, you may think I'm totally nuts and crazy, but I really believe so. For example, if you record a mix at home, like 10 records, and you will record it done, then you mix the same records in a club, and I think it will be absolutely different, just because your own energy with the energy of people around, and also the atmosphere in the room, it will be completely different experience.
Well, I mean, I know this to be true from like my own forays into bedroom DJing or whatever, and I'm sure lots of listeners have had the same experience too, that when you're playing records at home and you press record on your computer or your tape player or whatever, the mix just feels flat. It doesn't come out well. But then if you have some friends over, or if you get to go play someplace and you play almost exactly the same things, it just feels way better and the energy is there.
Yeah, of course, there is another thing is that sometimes if you have like really strong focus and you're alone in a room and you are like, for example, if I produce music and I'm focused and I have a lot of emotional context, yeah, of course it also will be reflected somehow. Like unless you're really focused, you feel it really well. I think it's very different when you mix it actually with an actual crowd. So the other concept I was thinking, okay, not only this is important, but also do I want to, for example, mix all the music that I have in this kind of ghetto manner, where you play music very fast according to grooves, you just put in tracks in and out super fast without actually really gluing them with each other, yeah, without even blending them. Or you want to have this more texture and you just want to have smooth mixing, like very long mixes, and just one record after another. Or the third thing, I thought maybe I would like to have this absolutely different approach. I would like to make it a little bit more trippy with loops, I would like to structure it a little bit different and play same songs or different parts from the same songs throughout the mix. And then I thought, yeah, but that means I would only do it like a studio mix with lots of editing, which is interesting, but what about this live approach that I really like? So in the end, I would re-record some parts live and some parts would come there from like additional editing, because otherwise you can't really do it. So it was really interesting. And then in the end, I decided to make this hypnotic kind of mix with underwater flow, not really with obvious emotion, but rather to leave this decision to the listener. I wanted to share my favorite concept about this whole thing. There are a few, but my favorite, and the one that I really feel, is that the most beautiful thing about this DJing and playing records is that you can always create your own mood and your own story and your own world by playing music which is not too obvious enough already. If I select 10 songs and blend them together, this is one thing, yeah? But I was never interested in that. I like moods and I like the feeling that is not that obvious, that always leaves you a little bit of space for your own imagination, that a little bit stimulates your own brain, your own head to work and to reconstruct the picture according to your own needs or your own, potential.
I definitely hear that in this mix because there aren't a lot of like really obvious hooks on it. It's quite dark, it's quite rhythmic, and it's very textural. And you have to really, I think, as a listener, listen very closely to hear those hooks, to kind of hear the melodies and the melodic content that's hanging out underneath.
Yes, I agree with you, but I think there was basically a few parts where I think it outstands, I think, with this Goldie track and with this David Bowie vocal, which is one of my favorite parts of the mix. It was such a big drama, we couldn't really license the track until the very last moment, and I said I'm not going to release the mix if this track is not going to be there. I was this track is so special for me, and Goldie was really so sweet to help us, and DJ Geek's team also did a lot of work to help us to get the track, because it was released on the major label. It was almost impossible to license, but finally we got it. And I loved it how because when this vocal comes out and there are still some tracks playing, and then there will be 3 tracks playing at the same time, and Sometimes it was also a really funny moment of a lot of people, oh, like Armando, this cool track that you included for the mix. But then they're like, wait a minute, but where's the track? Because I only, I never really like the most obvious parts. I really like always just a little loop or a little moment, but that's exactly what I want. And the first part of this track, there's just this kind of Blade Runner inspired monologue with just some very strange harmonies that are not really minor, not major, like something in between, something really dusky. Yeah, and I just took it and I incorporated it in the whole mix. So the main part actually never really comes out. And some tracks in the mix are just for 20 seconds, just for one moment. Or, for example, I licensed a track of Fred P, which is a beautiful house composition track, but never ever even starts to evolve like in the original, because I just looped the one part which I found so hypnotic. I was just listening to it and I was like, oh, wait a minute, I think this is really something what I want. Because he just says something there and his voice is just loosens some murky, dark mood, and I was yeah, it's great. So this whole mix is like a lot of speaking. There was this another record by Jay Denham, and there's a lot of people just talk, and their talks are not for you to understand what exactly they're saying, but just actually to kind of sink you even more a little bit underwater, just so you're hypnotized a little bit. Mm-hmm. And this is not obvious, the pace of the mix is very, you can have your own imagination from start to the end. This is something that I think is cool about this mix.
I definitely think one thing a lot of people will take away from this mix is the vocals, or maybe I should say the voices, because it's not all singing. And this is something that I think has been a big feature of your music in general, is the human voice. Like, as abstract as your productions or as your DJ mixes or whatever will get at times, there's always still this human voice that you get in there. I mean, do you think that really is the way into your music?
I know why I use a lot of my own voice in my own production. This is very clear for me. When I do music, I don't use a lot. I'm not really... I told you, that I don't have a classical education, musical education. But I've been always having pretty good ears, yeah. Since I was very little, because me and my father, we would listen a lot of psychedelic stuff, like rock, some really weird shit, I'm sorry. And I kind of always liked to play with harmonies, and I loved singing. And my singing wasn't that kind of outstanding that my parents would be like, wow, the kid has to go and take some vocal classes, become Montserrat Caballé or something. But I loved it. I loved it a lot to vocalize my emotions, yeah. I loved it so much. And then when this moment came and I actually started trying to produce my music, to make music, which was like quite a long time ago, I had a very, very minimalistic equipment set up. I had just one synthesizer, the first synthesizer that I have ever bought. It was a Korg R3. Very simple, but actually I love it so much. And a very simple drum machine, drum rack actually, computer, sound card, and the mic. Because I wake up or I go to bed, I always have my head, my brain not completely rested. It's keep on rolling with, I have thousands of ideas that I constantly circulate in my head, and sometimes in between those ideas, I have music, harmonies, voices, something like this. It all depends on the emotional context or what I have experienced throughout the day or whatever. What's the goal of the day or something. But sometimes it's really intense. One of my most prolific times was actually when I was in the beginning, in the very, very beginning of all that. I was really suffering in my, not really suffering, but I was like quite suffering in my love stories, and it was so inspiring. And it gave me a lot of inspiration and somehow lyrics and melodies and everything and just harmonies, they would come out of me without any invitation. So, it was such an intense time for me when all my first records came out. This I'm Gonna Get You, Pain in the Ass, then I did this record for Just Set's label, Underground Quality. All at the same time, it was super, super emotional. Or I'm Weak, or all those other songs. I would make them in a minimum time. It was all one takes. I would just start doing something, and just because of my ears and harmonies, I would just play these chords according to my hearing, actually. And as soon as there is something lacking and I just feel that I want it to be there, the sound or the melody or the harmony, I would just recreate it with my voice.
Well, yeah, a drum machine and a synthesizer, like these both have a lot of knobs. There's a lot of programming that goes into them, but
that's pretty easy still.
Yeah, but compared to how easy it is to get sound to come out of your own vocal cords, I mean, that's the fastest way to get an idea out there.
For me, my approach in the production is like this. If it ain't coming out from you, then just leave it. It's my own approach. I switch on something. If it's there, if an idea is really interesting and complete and worthy, then it's going to be made really fast. To lock the idea, actually, I really believe not only in music, but in everything. The really good idea is the one that is coming quick and is actually being pretty much spontaneous. And because it's really locked quick, that means it's so almost ideal that you don't need much to add up to it. It's already there. When I do some records, for example, I produced Ghetto Kraviz in 20 minutes. It was just there. I thought, okay, that's finished. I have nothing anymore to add there. It's just my own minimalistic approach to it. But coming back to vocals, you were absolutely right. What could be easiest and the most, comfortable way for a person like me to really, to release an emotion or a musical idea? Of course, the mic. And actually, I'm somehow glad that I was in the very beginning I didn't really have a lot of instruments, because it was minimizing to maximize the outcome somehow, because I was squeezing everything out. My whole world was just available for creativity, and I made so many interesting things that were so wrong, and no one who actually had an experience and a real classic vision on how to make music or how to play the keys and all that kind of thing would never really come out with it, because I was just doing everything against the kind of the rules. So I made kick drums with my vocals. I would just, pitch down using the very simple tools and effects to make anything I want out of my vocals if I don't see something that I need in my equipment at the moment. So I would make numerous pads with my voices, and then people asking sometimes, what is this synthesizer you used here? Why is the sound so interesting? I never heard this. I was like, oh well, this is basically my own voice just through Vermona Spring Reverb or something like this, and it just sounds so cool now. And so basically what I'm trying to say, I always use my voice as not only to it's a very personal thing, it's hello, it's me, but also as a tool. And it's just simply the easiest instrument for me that is just there from whenever I want it.
Do you still work with quite a minimalist setup when you're producing?
Well, now I'm a kind of a gypsy. I used to have my little studio and with quite a few synthesizers. I mean, come on, yeah. I had, of course, 2-3 years after I developed a little bit the studio, and I bought me amazing monitors, mixer, everything. But now I'm a little gypsy, and now I live in Berlin. I don't have my own studio place at the moment. So, for example, what I would do, I would just go to someone's studio or rent one, and with my own synthesizer or drum machine. And but the funny thing is that last time, for example, I bought this synthesizer Korg Lambda. It was so big, and I was thinking, okay, it was amazing because there was this remix for Paris Mitchell, for this Dance Money producer, and there was a need to make a remix. So I said, okay, then I need an inspiration, because for me the main point about the music is inspiration, and how quick and how productive you can be, and how quick you can produce ideas and lock them. So I was thinking, okay, I need to make some new remix. I was making also new EP for RA.EX that time. What would be the best inspiration? And then I just got me a new synthesizer, which is really great. Also a new drum machine. And it was enough for a new track. And I made this John Carpenterish remix, kind of very trippy, which I was quite happy with. There was a lot of vocals, again, like not really vocals, but spoken words. You know, just sometimes I just feel there should be spoken words. And there are spoken words in that track, not from me, but from someone else. I think it adds up something to the story, you know. For me, the track is always somehow a story, even if it's a loop, you know. It was just an endless loop. There should be something around it. But as soon as I finished the remix, I left the synth there because I just don't have anywhere to put it. I don't have my studio, but now I'm I'm looking for a place at the moment. I'm also interested at the moment. I'm contacting different companies for different models. I would like to construct my own modular synthesizer, just according to my needs. It's really, really interesting. I loved it. I've been to Japan recently, and I attended this festival of modular synthesizers. It was really beautiful. There's this live sessions where the whole auditorium stands in headphones and listens to the live session on modular synthesizers. Wearing the headphones, this was great, absolutely amazing. I would really like to go further with this. Yeah, and I just left all the synthesizers exactly in the studios where I worked, but now I have to collect them and put them in the studio. In the end, there's been a lot of synthesizers, so if I group them now and I put them all together, it's going to be already quite interesting. And also all my effectors and all my this and that, it's going to be, yeah. The new instrument for me is primarily the source of inspiration, just to touch something, to get really inspired by this. And then as a result of communication with the synthesizer, which I really think that the synthesizer has a soul, especially I like old synthesizers. It has not only the soul, it also has its own mood. You know, many people, for example, they do not understand sometimes how difficult it could be to program some machines that are kind of iconic, and they think it's so easy, but it's damn not easy. You know, for example, when you just take the 303, many people think it's so easy to just 303, isn't it? But it's not. It's just to program this machine, it requires a lot of practice and knowledge, because this machine is super tricky. And I like this trickiness about synthesizers. That's why I love working mostly with them. And then I record some parts, and when I record some music or some tracks in the studio, there's always something that is not used left. Like how I work, I only record live, and then if it needs further editing, then I maybe cut it or whatever. But normally I like to be everything to have it recorded live. This is my approach, because I believe that the energy that is there from the first take is the most honest and the most powerful and most interesting. Funny thing that I always keep this whole kind of trash. That's what because you know, sometimes people work like that. They know what they want, so they just re-record. They do a lot of recording and again the same chords until they really reach what they want. Yeah, my subject of interest is something else. I like mistakes. I like mistakes, really weird coincidences, like where the machine did some really strange tweak, like, and then there is this sound that you have never programmed and you thought, like, what is going on here? And for me, every time it happens, I truly believe this is a signal from outer space. This is my connection to the other galaxies. Honestly, I think I love this idea, this concept. And then when I'm traveling, for example, I made this track that I put on my own label, Improve, like this, like actually in the airport, because I just took something from my different sessions, found the most obscured, weird parts and atmospheres, and layered them. I like layering interesting parts. You know, when someone is showing you a color, like this is red, yeah?
Sure.
This is surely green. This is obviously black. This is particularly white. But I never really liked colors like that. I don't like obvious colors, definitions, obvious harmonics, obvious notes. I don't like too sharp frequencies. I like everything blended. And I like something that comes in between. It's green that is almost blue, black that is almost gray, with some inclusions of, I don't know, silver or whatever. I like these undertones. I like that kind of people. I like that kind of approach in life. I believe that's what actually shapes the personality. That's the most important thing for me. And this is the biggest value for me in the whole thing, just to enjoy and to see all these undertones and semi-colors and this dusk areas of life, harmonies and melodies. That is where, the space that is rather empty than too full, because it's a little bit empty. You can always add up something of yourself there and make it genuinely yours, and have your own way of thinking and your own corridor for your own things, feelings, emotions.
I wanted to ask you about the label Trip, especially with the first release, which is the Deviant Octopus, right?
Yeah.
I can really sort of hear that aesthetic in the tracks that you chose for that release. That must be a lot of fun for you, running a label. Has it been a good experience?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love it. Actually, it took me a little while to set up a label. But I finally did it. It's been really a big pleasure, for sure. Because I could finally do something according to my way of thinking. And the label is called Trip. Just like could be just a travel trip to Mars, trip to Paris.
And I wanted to ask about that name too, because it's just Trip, like the English word, but spelled in Cyrillic characters.
Cyrillic, yeah, it's called Trip. I mean, like I said, it could be this normal trip from A to Z, but it could be also a little mental trip. It's a bit trippy, isn't it? My life is definitely a bit trippy, and I don't know. I just sometimes see things. I just woke up one time and I thought about this octopus, that he was just so lovely and nice, and then suddenly just devoured everyone inside without a moment's notice. He has eaten everyone, and he didn't really got it what happened actually. Just like flipped in a second and to do. Yeah, that happens. Yeah. And then I thought, I was just going through my computer and I saw on Facebook some guy, artist, who made this really weird drawing of me, super dark and completely mysterious. I was immediately on his case, of course. I was like, asking, what is this? Like, where did you get that? He was like, sorry, I didn't mean anything wrong. Because some people are just a little scared of my reactions, because I'm pretty straightforward with everything I say. But I said, it's beautiful, it's amazing. it reminded me of this moment. Just watched a documentary about Pink Floyd. It's one of my favorite bands. And they were talking about this moment in Dark Side of the Moon, and the vocalist did this on top of the song they made. So they asked her to sing something, and she was like doing this amazing, absolutely beautiful solo in the most human, sometimes incorrect way, was like super open. And then she finished, and she was going out of the room with tears, like saying, "I'm sorry, guys, it was horrible. Apologies." And they were like, "No, it's absolutely fantastic. It's beautiful. It's for me, it's one of the most beautiful moments in music." But it also reminded me somehow how different perception of different people could be, you know. I don't know, it just was something completely else. Anyway, but so I said, "Hey, dude, let's do something together. I like what you're doing. You have to be in contact." And by the way, you know, I just woke up and I had this trip about an octopus. So I told him the story. Actually, he's Portuguese. His octopus is a pretty usual thing for them because they cook a lot of... I think it was really weird coincidences somehow. Octopus, Portuguese guy, da, da, da. So I was like, okay. And then in the next days, he just came up with this visualization of what I told him about. So he basically drawn the whole story, and I said, okay, cool. So that's how it is going to be on my label. So the artwork, which will be expressing, visualizing the trip, the story, because there is always a story around the label. And sometimes people think it's like a various compilation, but it's not. It's not really a typical various artist compilation. It's just that I'm signing music constantly from different people, and then when another idea or trip comes in, I have something to select it from, and I'm actually looking for music that would combine the whole idea around it, yeah. So it's not like randomly put tracks. There's always a connection. But actually, I was pretty happy. I was thinking nobody really would get it, but I totally realized that some people got it, that it's actually connected, that there is a story behind it. And every track is on its place because of that. So, yeah, I'm very glad about it.
Do you have a story or a concept or a dream, a trip, whatever, that you're working with for the next release, the next few?
Yeah, the next one gonna be about Robert De Niro.
Robert De Niro.
Yes.
How did that one come about?
Well, that's a little personal, but I had also a strange dream about that. You know, that's about Robert De Niro, that he just also, in the middle of the night, he woke up in pain, you know, just totally sweating. Like, how come for my whole career I haven't done a single bad movie, you know, in my life? What the hell am I doing here? So he got extremely upset about it and disappointed. So he packed his little bag and went down the Hollywood hill. That's it.
I'm looking forward to hearing this.
Yeah.
This is going to be really great.
Just get extremely bored, basically.
Summer's gonna